Hello students and welcome to another English lesson. Today we will be covering participle clauses and determiners, which are not that difficult on their own, but it is useful to know a few little things about them so you can recognize them better. So let's start right away. Now first we have this text on the left side, and we have a photograph as well. It's a very sort of bizarre photograph. I think it's pretty interesting. And the text tells us a little more about it. So I will read the text for now, and you can focus on what it says. This picture, called Boxing, shows two men fighting on a skyscraper. The men, dressed in matching shorts and t-shirts, are very near the edge of the building. The man wearing blue boxing gloves is hitting the other man, who is about to fall. This large picture, measuring 176 by 366 centimeters, is one of a collection of photos currently exhibited by photographer Li Wei in Hong Kong. Li Wei, born in China in 1970, is well known for his unusual and gravity-defying photographs, produced without the use of computer software. As you may or may not have noticed, this text is actually full of participle clauses. We will recognize them together, but first let's see what they look like. Let's see what they are. We have a few pointers or rules for participle clauses. The first one being that we can use participle clauses to give more information about a noun. It's sort of like a relative clause. And as they say, they can be described as shortened relative clauses, both defining and non-defining. For instance, there's a man making a call is a participle clause, and there's a man who is making a call would be a relative clause. For a relative clause, we need a relative pronoun, so who or what or which or that. But with participle clauses, we don't need it, so it's kind of shortened that way. Number two says that they contain either a present participle in an ing form or a past participle in the ed form, or what if it's irregular, one of the words from the third row in your irregular past verbs that you can find in your books. Clauses with a present participle replace an active verb. So if the clause ends with ing, it is replacing an active verb. For instance, she's wearing a necklace belonging to her aunt. In other words, she is wearing a necklace which belonged to her aunt. And of course, the verb they replace can be in any tense. It doesn't matter in which tense the original verb is. And number four, clauses with a past participle replace a passive verb in any tense. So if it ends with ed, or an irregular verb in the third row, it's replacing a passive verb. For instance, the match shown on TV this evening will be watched by millions. So the match which will be shown on TV this evening. This is why if we use the English passive, we also use the past participle. Now let's check out the participle clauses that we can find in the text itself. For instance, the picture, called Boxing, shows two men fighting on a skyscraper. So the first one is past participle and the second one is present participle, because the picture is called boxing, or the picture which is called boxing. It's a passive verb, and fighting or to fight is of course an active verb. So we are using the present participle here. In other words, it shows two men who are fighting on a skyscraper. The men dressed in matching shorts and t-shirts, again, past participle, the men who are dressed. The man wearing blue boxing gloves, present participle, the man who is wearing. This large picture, measuring, so we have the present participle again, which is measuring. A collection of photos currently exhibited by photographer Li Wei. Li Wei, born in China in 1970. And photographs produced without the use of computer software. So photographs which are produced. So in this case, it is a past participle, or although the verb to produce can be used as in the form of the present participle, it just depends if it's an active or passive verb. In this case, the photos are being produced. They are the object, they are passive, so we will be using the past participle. But if a man is producing, I don't know, a factory is producing, for instance, coffee, then we will say the factory producing coffee is located in Zagreb or whatever. So it can be interpreted both ways. It just matters if it's the object or the subject of the sentence, or if it serves the object or the subject of the sentence. Now we have a little exercise. We need to rewrite the sentences about boxing using participle clauses to replace the underlying words. Here we just have to figure out if we're going to use the present or the past participle. So take a few moments and try to solve this exercise either in your notebooks or on your computers. And let's check the answers. The man who is falling from the building becomes the man falling from the building. So we just removed the relative pronoun who. The city which stretches into the distance becomes the city stretching into the distance. Both of them are present participle because they're active verbs. The photographs or the photograph which was taken in 2009 becomes the photograph taken in 2009. It stays in the past participle because it is passive, and we just remove the relative pronoun which. And furthermore, it is part of a collection which is called Beyond Gravity, and we turned it into it is part of a collection called Beyond Gravity. So we removed which. Li Wei, who was born in Hubei, becomes Li Wei born in Hubei. And in 2006, Li Wei received an award for creativity, which was presented by the Getty Museum. It becomes he received an award for creativity presented by Getty Museum. Again, it stays in the past participle. Now you can look at the photo. It's called Li Wei Falls to the Earth, and complete the phrases using, again, the present or the past participle of the verbs below. You can pause this video and take a few moments to solve this exercise, and then we will check it together. Let's check. So a road lined with trees, that's number one. We put a past participle here because it is, of course, passive. The road is being lined with trees. If you can rephrase it by using the ing form of the verb to be, so being something, then it is probably a past participle. Number two is a man wearing a blue t-shirt, present participle because it's active, the man who wears a blue t-shirt. A boy sitting on a wall. A man buried upside down in the road. Two men chatting to each other. And a man carrying boxes on the back of his bicycle. Now that we have figured out participle clauses, we can spend some time on determiners. First, we will read our text in red, which has some determiners in red as well. So while I'm reading the text, you can try to see if you recognize some of these determiners. I think you will probably by now, but you maybe didn't know that they were called determiners. But in any case, let's go through it together. So the text is called Natural Born Writer, and it says, Stig Larsson was a Swedish journalist who spent much of his time campaigning against right-wing extremism. Many Swedes were familiar with Larsson's work as a political activist, but outside Sweden, few people knew his name. He was a busy man who had little time for hobbies, but he did spend some time doing creative writing. Most evenings, he would spend a few hours at his desk just to relax. He didn't need much sleep, only 3 or 4 hours every night. When Larsson had completed 3 novels, he sent them to a publisher, but died suddenly before any of them were published. Since his death, each book in what is referred to as the Millennium Trilogy has sold millions of copies. Larsen had no idea his books were going to be so successful, and sadly, he died before he could enjoy any of the money or fame. Now, with that sort of sad story about Stieg Larsson, who unfortunately died before his time, we will move on to a bit of a brighter topic, maybe not more interesting, but definitely brighter, which is determiners. So here on the right, we have a list of determiners. And here we have a few categories. For instance, a determiner appearing next to a singular countable noun. In this case, it is any. As you can see, any can appear in all three categories. So we saw any over here, any of them, in other words, any of the books. And a book is, well, in this case, it's a plural noun. So any of them, any of the books. But otherwise, if it were countable, it would still be able to appear after the determiner any, or an uncountable noun. For instance, any of the money or fame. An uncountable noun is a noun that we simply cannot count or measure. Of course, money is a bit weird here because in a sense you can count money, but money in this sense is money as a concept, money as a construct, for instance, like love or like fame, which you cannot count. You can measure fame to a certain degree, but you cannot really count it. So it is an uncountable noun. Now, with that in mind, let's look at these determiners and see where do they appear in the text. So the first one is every. First, we need to find it in the text. Here we have every night, and night is a singular countable noun. One night, 2 nights. We can count it, and in this case, it appears in the singular form. Afterwards, we have each. In this case, it appears in front of book, which is again a singular countable noun. 1 book, 2 books. We can count it, yet here it is in the singular. As you can see, no has already been solved. We have no idea. It says that it's in front of an uncountable noun, idea, although idea is technically a countable noun, 1 idea, 2 ideas, but in this case, it's a phrase. He had no idea, in other words, no clue what he was getting himself into. And in this metaphorical sense, it is an uncountable noun, but it can also appear in front of a plural noun. He had no trousers, for instance, but not in front of a singular countable noun. Any, as we have discussed, can appear in all 3 cases. Some can appear with a plural noun, but it can also appear with an uncountable noun. For instance, some water. Water is uncountable. But in the text, it appears next to a plural noun. Sometime, well, here actually it appears in front of an uncountable noun. He did spend some time, and time is an uncountable noun. You cannot count time. You can only count minutes or hours or seconds, but not time as a concept. We have all, which appears in front of both a plural noun and an uncountable noun. Now, all is not in the text, but it can be used with both a plural noun, all the books, for instance, or an uncountable noun, all the time. For instance, he has all the patience in the world. That's another example. We have most, which is here used with an uncountable noun, most of the time, for instance, or it was ticked as an uncountable noun. But over here, we have it appearing with a countable plural noun, most evenings. You can count evenings, 1 evening, 2 evenings. So it can be both a plural noun and an uncountable noun, like most of the time, for instance. Then we have much. In this case, much appears with sleep, which is an uncountable noun. You cannot count sleep, and you will never hear sleeps other than in the present simple in the 3rd person singular, he sleeps, but not as a noun in the plural. I had 2 sleeps. No, you had 2 nights of sleep, maybe, but not 2 sleeps, right? You can use it with much of the time, for instance, and so on. It cannot be used with a singular, of course, because it denotes something that there is more of, but it cannot be used with a plural noun either. So much is only used with an uncountable noun. On the other hand, many can be used with a plural noun. For instance, in the text, we have many Swedes. One Swede, but many Swedes. And it cannot be used as with an uncountable noun. So when we have an uncountable noun, we use much. And when we have a countable noun, a plural countable noun, we use many. The next one is few. Few can be used with a plural noun as well. I have few boxes of chocolate. I don't have many. But it cannot be used with the singular countable noun. And a few in the text appears with a countable noun, a few hours. But it's a plural form, of course. We cannot use it with the singular form, and we cannot use it with the uncountable noun. Little will be used for uncountable nouns. We have little time. And it will not be used with plural forms, plural nouns or singular. And a little is also used with an uncountable noun. So I have little time means I really don't have much time. And the I have a little time means I have a bit of time, right? So if a friend asks you for a favor and you are really busy, you really don't have time to help him, you will say, I'm sorry, I have little time. But if you do have a few minutes to spare, you will say, oh, I have a little time. You know, I can help you. I have a half an hour or so. And of course, little and a little cannot be used with either singular countable or plural countable nouns. So with plural countable nouns, we use few and a few. So as you can see, a lot of these cannot appear in the singular, although no can be in the singular, although this is in specific cases. For instance, you have no heart. So it can be used, but it sounds a little dramatic when you use it, although it's, you know, it's grammatically correct. You can use it. It sounds a little theatrical. I mean, I gave a theatrical example, so it's supposed to happen. Now here we have another exercise. It says that we need to complete the sentences with the determiners below. So pause this video, take a few moments, and try to complete this in your notebooks or on your computers. Now let's check. So the first one says there wasn't any music in the film, just sound effects. So music is an uncountable noun. You cannot count how much music there is. You can count how many songs there are, compositions and so on, but not how much music there is. And it says any. There wasn't any music. It means there were no music in the film. I haven't got much money, because money is an uncountable noun and much goes with uncountable nouns. Many goes with countable nouns. Some of his plays are written in French, others in English. So some can be used with countable nouns. Play is a countable noun. Unfortunately, there are no tickets left. So no can be used with the simple countable plural noun, tickets. Each correct answer is worth 1 point. Each can be used with singular, answer, each answer, and it cannot be used with plural. You cannot say each answers. So this is a specific case where you can only use it in the singular. And all champagne is made in France. Now, down here, we have a little box that warns us to look out. And it says, we use few and little rather than a few and a little when we want to emphasize the smallness of the number or quantity. It usually has a negative meaning. Compare. Luckily, I've made a few friends at my new school. or sadly, I've made few friends at my new school. So both of them are talking about a small amount of friends, but the first one takes a more positive stance. So I've made a few friends. That's good, as opposed to no friends, right? While the other one says I've made few friends. And what they mean is I haven't made enough friends. I want to make more friends. So that's the difference. It's not a big difference, but it matters when you use these expressions. And finally, once we have read the lookout box and once I have explained this phenomenon to you, we can complete task 5. We need to complete these sentences with few, a few, little, or a little. So again, take a few moments to pause the video and solve exercise number 5, and then we will go through it together. Okay, let's check. So number 1 says, I'll ask my dad if we can go to the festival, but there's little chance he'll say yes. So this person sort of expects their dad to say no. And this is why they say there's little chance. There's not much chance that he will say yes. Number 2 says, can you give me a little time to think about it? So can you give me some time to think about it? We can't put little time here, right? Can you give me little time? That would mean, can you give me not enough time to think, right? No one would ask for not enough time. So this is why we need a little time. Can you give me a few minutes to think? Number 3 is the mathematical problem is so complex that few people can understand it. Because it is so complex, the emphasis is on how little the group of people is that can understand it. And this is why we use few. Number 4 says, he's a very private person and little information is known about his personal life. Again, the emphasis is on the shortage of information, on how much information is hidden from us about this person. And this is why we will use little. I decided to spend a few days with my grandparents. Of course, this person didn't decide to spend few days. That would mean I decided to spend not enough days with my grandparents. They decided to dedicate a few days, a couple of days to spend with their grandparents. And number 6 says, the festival isn't well known. Few famous acts play there. Because of course, if it isn't well known, it means that the emphasis is on the fact that there's not a lot of like famous people, not a lot of big names on this festival. If we say a few famous acts play there, then the first sentence would be a little more positive. It would be like, the festival is growing bigger every year. A few famous acts already play there, right? But the emphasis is on the negative, and that's why we will use few. Another little cheat you can have in mind is few and little are, of course, smaller. They have fewer letters than a few and a little, and they denote a much bigger shortage. So if you're unsure, you can always remember that they're visually smaller as well, but I don't think you need it. I think you can figure it out. You know, you can remember this. It's not very difficult. That was it for today. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.